Good morning. It's June 3rd, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standard's daily live show. We run Monday to Friday, 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard until usually about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Being live, again, I invite those comments. I see Claudette and Gary already out there and others joining in. Let's interact, make this, a more fun experience. It keeps things fluid and keeps things moving. Send me your thoughts. Chat with each other, send questions to the guests. I might not read them all on the air, but I do see them all out there, and it helps keep the show flowing. Again, we always got to remember to remain a little civil with each other. It's so easy to get into fights online. It's funny. Getting into beekeeping. Nico was asking me about that earlier. I bought the hive. I got it all set up. I got the gear. I've been doing YouTube University. But my bees have been delayed. I'm just waiting and waiting. Canada's had a real problem with bees this year. They should be here within 10 days or so. But so of course I'm studying as much as I can, and I follow online discussions, and there's a beginners beekeeping group on Facebook. And my God, these guys fight like cats and dogs on there. I mean, it's supposed to be just a group where beginners are sharing advice and things on how to beekeep, and still they're calling each other names and getting on each other's case. So we really got to watch that whole internet thing and somehow try to stay. You can't even talk about beekeeping without getting into a scrap. And hey, I had nothing to do with that. I just read it. I don't participate. Either way, let's see what the other stuff that's going on today and stuff to talk about. Got a couple of strange observances for today on the things to watch around the world. It is National Itch Day. Yes, so for all of your allergies, scratching, hives, whatever issues you've got going on, today's the day I guess you can openly scratch them, enjoy them, dislike them, whatever you do. I don't know how these things get declared. I suspect Claritin or calamine lotion manufacturer or something like that has come up with this one, but all the same, to your favorite itchy friend, go to the Hallmark store and get a National Itch Day card and celebrate. It's also National Clubfoot Day. Not a term you hear all that often anymore. As we see, actually, yes, it's World Clubfoot Day. But I mean, hey, it's serious for some other people, and they do have to concern themselves with it. So I guess, once a year, we want to point out and remember that there's a lot of people with club feet out there that are having a rough day. On a brighter side, I think it's also supposed to be National Donut Day or something else like that. So you don't have to look at nothing but negative, itchy clubfoot stuff for the afternoon. It is Friday, and that's a good day for most people. All right, I got a few guests today, 3 spots actually. So we got Dave Makichuk. It's not so long ago since he was here. He's with the Western Standard, but he wrote a piece on the Canadian military and some crazy stuff going on with Chinese pilots have been buzzing Canadians' planes out there on the seas and really kind of illustrating just how far our military has fallen in equipment and gear, at least anyways. So we're going to talk a bit about that. Then we're going to have the panel back that I had yesterday, Jonathan Bradley and Matthew Horwood. We'll just kind of break down what happened with the Ontario election last night. It kind of went to a large degree as predicted, and both opposition leaders, it sounds like, resigned in light of the results now. And we'll just talk about what that means for Ontario and what they got to do going forward. Then I'm going to have Peter McCaffrey with Common Sense Calgary on. He's just going to round out the show. He'll be here in person. And we're going to chat about that, again, insanely large $87 billion climate plan put out by the city of Calgary that I'm still floored by that number. Maybe Mr. McCaffrey can, shed some light on whether this is really even going to happen or how we could possibly pay for something like that. All right, so I'm going to get on to some news and some good news, something optimistic out of me. It's been a good week for Alberta First Nations. To start with, a long-standing land claim with the Sikhsica First Nation east of Calgary has been settled, and the Enoch First Nation west of Edmonton has announced the construction of a charter surgical facility on their land. Both good news things. Starting with the Sikhsica Settlement, while many modern interpretations of treaty obligations have been dubious, one thing that it has been crystal clear within all treaties has been the delineation of borders within the reserves. Treaties are usually pretty simple documents, and they're all online to be seen. Now, Canada changed the terms after the fact with the Sikhsica Reserve and took a large chunk of their land away from them. Hopefully, the settlement announced will lead to some final resolution so folks can start looking forward instead of back. And in fact, one of the Sikhsica elders said precisely that during the press event on the reserve yesterday. And it was heartening to hear. Now, on to the fantastic new venture announced by the Enoch Cree First Nation. Chief Billy Morin has been heading the Enoch Cree since 2015, and he hit the ground running. He's a pragmatic young leader, and he intends to diversify the economy on his reserve, predominantly through healthcare services. So Morin has spoken in the past of setting things up from birthing centers to research facilities for diabetes. He sees an opportunity for his people in the field of health due to the rigid regulations hindering development of private facilities off of reserve land. It's a real creative idea. The first big healthcare facility on his reserve is now set to be built next year. The Enoch Cree Nation has partnered with Surgical Centers Incorporated to open up a surgical center that's going to offer up to 3,000 publicly funded, still in the health system, people aren't paying out of pocket, knee and hip replacements a year. This would work in conjunction with Alberta Health Services, and the provincial government appears eager to help the project along. Now, waiting lists for healthcare in Canada's socialized healthcare system are terrible, and they've been growing. In Alberta, it takes an average of 26 weeks just to get a surgical consultation for a knee or hip replacement. After that, it takes nearly a year on average to actually get the surgical procedure done. So you're talking a year and change from pain to treatment in this system. Meanwhile, patients are in a painful, debilitated condition. They're often out of work while waiting for surgery, and they're taking a lot of painkillers. We got to shorten these times. The new center on the Enoch Cree Reserve will be a godsend for thousands of Albertans. Facilities providing private care within the public system are vulnerable to Canada's ideologically driven environment. While the Cambie Clinic in BC was a great success, it's under constant legal attack from the NDP government that opposes all private care, even if it benefits patients and taxpayers alike. It makes Canada a difficult and risky place for healthcare investments. With Canadian First Nations getting in on the private provision of healthcare, though, we could be seeing a game changer. First Nations exist in a semi-autonomous state within Canada. Reserves are largely self-governing, and they're exempt from many local laws. That's why you can still smoke indoors at a First Nations casino, for example. If a First Nations healthcare facility faces legal challenges from leftist governments, the challenges will probably lose. And even if the challenge wins, a reserve can be inclined to tell the courts to get stuffed, and there won't be much repercussion. While the left would rather have people die on waiting lists than reform the healthcare system, they'd also rather walk on hot coals barefoot before getting into a battle with First Nations. How would it look if Rachel Notley became premier again? It would look bad in a number of ways, but then she tried to shut down the healthcare facility on the Enoch Cree Reserve. How many people on reserves would she be willing to put out of work? Most major cities in Western Canada have First Nation reserves, either near or bounding upon them. I imagine the Tsuut'ina Nation west of Calgary is watching the Enoch Cree project with interest. And the Sikhsica Reserve could be considering healthcare centers as a place to invest their $1.3 billion that they just recently got. A private imaging clinic offering MRI and CT services owned by the James Smith Cree Nation actually has been operating successfully in Saskatoon since 2020, and they might plan on expanding as well. Medical centers on First Nations land are win-win-win. Revenue and skilled jobs are brought to First Nations reserves. Waiting lists for medical procedures in the public system will be reduced, and the system will likely save money in the process. Let's hope the Enoch Cree Surgical Center is just the first among dozens we're going to see on First Nations reserves across Canada. All right, that's what I got. Let's check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Bad, Cory. You did it again yesterday, didn't you?
What did I do again yesterday?
Albert Einstein, Cory, said the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting the result to be different. So why do you do it? Why do you leave your sandwiches out on the side?
Oh, well, it's not over and over. It's every couple of weeks I forget, and then the dog snatches and teaches. I don't know if it's insanity. I'll admit it's just more like idiocy. But I'm just not wide awake in the morning when I'm making those sandwiches. But the dogs are up and ready to roll. So yeah, I got a half lunch yesterday again.
But you can't blame Duke the Wonder Dog. Here's a pro tip for you, Cory. Make your sandwiches the night before.
Oh, I don't have that kind of foresight. I'll see what I can do.
Anyways, I'm sure Duke the Wonder Dog's growing up nice, big, and fat with your sandwiches.
Oh, he's well fed.
So here's what we got on the site at the moment. Our publisher, Derek Fildebrand, has written a column saying the Prime Minister and many of the premiers across Canada owe the public an apology for the way they've been treated during the COVID vaccination lockdown. So that's a very good read and leading off our website at the moment. Speaking of National Itching Day, monkeypox has arrived in Alberta. The very first case was confirmed by Dr. Dina Hinshaw Thursday night. So our Amanda Brown has got a story up on that, and it does look horribly itchy. Our Linda Slobodian's got a very sad story developing in Winnipeg, where a young Indigenous woman was murdered mid last month. They only found her partial remains, and they've started today searching the Winnipeg area dump for the rest of the woman's remains, and they're not ruling out the possibility that there may be other victims of the same killer in there. So that's something we'll be keeping an eye out on. Calgary is soon set to be home to the world's tallest mural festival coming up shortly, and they're working on putting a huge mural on some big building in Calgary. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Believe it or not, the Liberals are complaining that there's a shortage of oil field workers in Canada, and I wonder why that is, Cory. Perhaps it's because the Liberals are trying to drive their profession. They're trying to shutter their profession and drive them all out of jobs. So is it any wonder people aren't lining up to get into the oil field industry? The most interesting man on earth, Elon Musk, says he's very worried about the economy, and he's going to lay off 10% of all his staff at Tesla. So when he's worried about the economy, things could be heading down south. And our Mike Thomas has got the latest housing stats out of Toronto and Vancouver, the two hottest places in the country, and the Bank of Canada increases in their interest rates seem to be working. So those two markets are cooling off just a little bit. And our Matthew Horwood has got an interesting development in the Tory leadership race. Alberta Senator Scott Tanis, well-respected senator, has thrown his lot in with Charest and will be supporting him for the leadership. So that's interesting, and we're working on lots more interesting stuff for not only this afternoon, Cory, but all through the weekend to keep our website up to date and current. So wish a good weekend to you and Duke the Wonder Dog.
Well, right on. Thanks. Well, lots of news coming and lots of news up. I appreciate the update, Dave. I'll see you after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to have to bring that dog into the standard headquarters at some point or another, but he is so terribly behaved, he would probably just make complete havoc here. So whenever I have decided it'll be my last day at the standard, if that happens, perhaps I'll go out with a big bang and bring Duke in to really show everybody just how big and insane that critter I've adopted is. All the same. Okay, as we said, lots of news out there, lots of things covered. This is the time when I like to remind you all, we can do that because of you and because of subscriptions. We're a privately based company. We don't want charity and we don't want tax funding, and we won't take it, even though we qualify for the tax funding. We're providing a service, and we would like people to pay for it. In this case, it's subscriptions for $99 for a year, $10 if you want to go month by month. You get full, unfettered access to all of our stories, our columns, all of the opinion, all of those things. And we get stuff, we get unique stories that break from our reporters that are all across the country. I'm going to have a couple from Ontario on a little today. And again, we can only do it because you guys subscribe. So thank you guys who have already subscribed. And if you haven't already, hey, get on there and take a subscription out. It's well worth it. You get your money's worth, and it helps us just keep expanding and covering more news. And nag other people, get them on board. Buy a subscription for that loony left Uncle Larry who drives you nuts at Thanksgiving dinner. Do it for fun. Maybe something will grow on him. So let's see there. Drew asking if I got my bees. One of the commenters, yeah, I mentioned that earlier. No, my bees are now, it looks like they should be June 14th. They've confirmed, they said it. I've got an appointment set to pick the darn things up very late in the season. Beekeepers in Canada have had a very exceptionally bad year due to the late spring, and then there's been a lot of overwintering. The bees haven't survived. A lot of beekeepers have been opening their hives, finding 70-80% losses this year, unfortunately. And there's a varroa mite infestation that's really messing with them. I'm looking forward to it, though. Hopefully mine goes without too many issues going on. It's interesting, Dave mentioned, and I saw that tweet as well from O'Regan talking about that, saying, oh, the reason we can't catch up with energy and oil is because we don't have enough employees right now. It is ridiculous. It's a slap in the face from a government that has been driving people out of the industry for years. It's been telling them, learn to code, telling them, find a green job, and shutting down projects, shutting down pipelines, saying there's no future in the industry when clearly there is, saying we're done, saying we have to transition, and now those dim bulbs are stuck with a labor shortage when we're sitting on some of the biggest energy reserves on Earth, and they're acting like surprised. Holy cow, we don't have anybody trained in extracting this stuff and getting it to market. Yeah, go figure, you imbeciles. You put us in this place. Don't act like this was a shock. Any economist worth half their salt could have, well, he did tell you this years ago. You ignored it. Ideologically driven lunatics. thinking that we could shut down our conventional energy generation and then just turn it back on if we had to, and that there wouldn't be problems with it. It takes a while. I mean, they live under that myth too, though, and that would get frustrating when times were good, because they would piss and moan about, some guy can just pick up and go and make $100,000 a year and buy a big pickup truck without skill. It's an ignorant, rude statement, and it shows that they had absolutely nothing about the energy sector or what's involved with it. So no, they won't have to have a degree in humanities to work in the oil field. They won't have to have that. It's quite post-secondary. But what they do have to do is have a lot of experience, on the ground experience. They have to learn. You don't just walk into a six-figure position. You never did. You had to put your time in out there. Plus, working in the energy sector is different. I was in the field for 20 years. When you go out to the field, you're gone. You're out for 10 hours a day, but you're staying in a hotel room or a camp, things like that. It's a lot of sacrifice for the money you're chasing. And, people who love it. But to try and imply, and as we're seeing now, you can't just fill those voids now with employees now that we suddenly need it, as O'Regan's realizing. When you've driven away all the experienced, skilled workers, and they are skilled workers in the energy sector, you can't turn it back on that quickly. It takes a while to train them. It takes a while to set them up. So now, here we are, hanging in an energy crisis, sitting on some of the biggest energy reserves on the planet, and we can't get them to market. Not to mention, they've shut down or delayed every bloody pipeline we've ever had, so we can't fill those world markets as well as we'd like to. Let's see. Before I get on to my guest here, we'll talk about one of our sponsors as well, of course, Getting Private Market, a nice Alberta company, and that is Bitcoin Well. These guys, their name sort of says it all. They are a company that facilitates your entrance into digital currencies, in particular Bitcoin. They're a publicly traded company. They're here in the West. The main thing with them is a couple of things. They keep your money safe. These are a non-custodial service company. What that means is you always have full control of your Bitcoin. They don't have it. They're just as I said, the facilitator, the service. Because there's a lot of people do get ripped off, unfortunately, with some digital currency things and scams. And the bottom line is that happens when you let them get a hold of your money. These guys don't. Plus, they're publicly traded. They're established out here. And they offer personalized one-on-one consultations. They will sit down free, and just like any other investment advisor, and you can talk to them about whether Bitcoin's right for you, might not be, might be, and how you would get involved in it. How can you use it practically? How do you even set up your wallet? How does it work? Well, that's the whole thing about BitcoinWell.com. These guys help inform you and lead you into the world of digital currencies, and they've been a fantastic sponsor for us for quite some time. So check them out, BitcoinWell.com, and take control of your money. All right, let's get to Mr. Makichuk. I see him sitting there in the lobby, and he's been a regular guest on the show. He's a columnist for the Western Standard, long experienced journalist in Canada here. How you doing, Dave?
I'm good. I'm good today. It's a beautiful day in Calgary. God, it's supposed to be going up to 20. It's just, it's gorgeous. It's just really a nice day.
Yeah, it makes it a little hard to sit here in the studio sometimes. I can kind of see through those windows out there. A few things I'd rather be doing, but
exactly.
Pay the bills. So I know it's been recent, but I just love that the story you put out. Well, not loved in a sense. It's kind of some bad news, but it also ties into kind of current events that are happening. I mean, it was almost like a sad sack version of the old Top Gun scene. Since Top Gun, the sequel, is now making the rounds on public view, I guess you could say. But where, in the past one, Tom Cruise flipped upside down and gave a finger to another pilot and took the picture. But in this case, it's really kind of happening, and it's Chinese pilots making fun of Canadian ones.
Yeah, it's part of this operation, this United Nations operation. I believe it's called Neon, Operation Neon, which involves monitoring North Korea for sanctions violations. And we've sent a Aurora, one of our big Auroras over there, with a rotating crew to take part in this operation. And it's the only thing really that we're doing as part of that. And basically, we're on the turf of this, in that area of the South China Sea. And China is apparently not really happy about this whole operation. And they've been buzzing our pilots. This aircraft, I should say. Oh, by the way, this is Bert, my cat. He's just he's helping me out here, but he's going to take a better position here. Anyway, he's obviously not impressed with my discussion. But anyway, yeah. So they're buzzing us. They're giving us the finger, not treating us with any respect. It's terrible. I mean, it's just. I mean, we've got this big lumbering old 30-plus-year-old. I mean, these things came in when Pierre Trudeau was still around, and back in the 80s, for God's sake. We should have replaced them, but instead we upgraded them, kept them. And so anyway, we got this one aircraft there, and the Chinese, apparently, according to one media report, which probably a lot of people saw, was that they're coming as close as 10 feet away from our aircraft, between 10 and 100 feet. And this has happened dozens of times since Christmas. But the only reason the Canadian government and Trudeau have said anything is because it was reported. We've been tolerating it all along since Christmas. I can't remember, dozens of interceptions, and some of them dangerous. And of course, the Trudeau government say this is, very concerning, and so on. And we've sent messages of disapproval to the Chinese, and they haven't even responded. Diplomatic messages of concern, but I mean, they obviously don't give a damn, and they know they can get away with it, and we're not going to do anything because, our prime minister basically has no backbone. We're not going to really do anything, and to be honest, I don't even know why we're there. It's a token effort. I mean, that aircraft should be guarding the Arctic and our shores. It's why are we even there? I mean, and they don't even want us there, which was part of the argument I was making in the article, was that we've sort of become the odd man out when it comes to Asia Pacific deals and agreements. We've been left out, and we've lost a lot of luster, cachet on the international scene.
Well, that's it. And I mean, on the whole international, not just the Asia Pacific area. And this is something we've seen for a while. I mean, Canada used to sort of punch above its weight diplomatically and militarily. I mean, we were respected peacekeepers. Of course, we certainly put our part in during the big wars, and did a lot of peacekeeping and had some strong diplomatic presence on the world stage. But unfortunately, again, I lay a lot of it. I mean, this has gone on for a long time. Some of these planes, I mean, there's past governments that could have upgraded or replaced these as well. But when it comes to respect on the world stage, I mean, you always see those pictures of any world gatherings, aside from the selfies and showing off the socks. When you see the serious leaders clustered and talking about things, Trudeau is literally always on the outside looking in. They don't have any time for him.
No, I think they kind of sense he's, to put it nicely, a lightweight. He's kind of a lightweight. And they realize that this guy is just, he's just, not quite all there. And they left us out of AUKUS, which is the Australia, UK, United States submarine deal, which is a huge deal, multi-billion-dollar deal. It totally took Ottawa by surprise. Ottawa had no idea that this was happening, and they were clearly embarrassed by it, and they played it down. And then just a few months later, we got left out of another AUKUS deal. That's AUKAS. It's kind of an odd named grouping. But again, the same group has signed a deal to create the latest in hypersonic missiles. And that technology is just very valuable. And again, we were left out of that. And then Strike 3, the Quad summit in Tokyo, which included Australia, the United States, Japan, and India. And India, for God's sake, has not even joined us in condemning what Russia is doing in Ukraine. We need them. I mean, obviously, that grouping needs India. India is a huge, a foremost economy, and it's growing quickly, and they're adding a lot of military equipment, and they're a valuable customer for the United States. But again, 1, 2, 3, and as the old surveillance intelligence axiom goes, once you can excuse, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is not coincidence. We are definitely being left out. We are the odd man out. They don't trust us. They don't trust us. And why would they?
And it's unfortunate. I mean, that kind of crosses over to the economic as well. I mean, as you said, India is really an emerging power in the world in a number of levels, and an economic powerhouse. I mean, we really want to do some trade with those guys. I mean, it's a fantastic market, bilaterally. But I mean, nobody can forget Trudeau's disastrous Indian trip. I mean, he embarrassed our nation over there. And Modi didn't even greet him at the airport when he would greet even typically a junior minister if they showed up. He was always a very welcoming host, and that's distressing. I mean, that's personal, and we should be paying attention to this.
Yeah, for some reason, Trudeau just this, that whole Ottawa trip was just an absolute disaster, and maybe that reverberated around diplomatic circles, and it probably hurt us. And again, our reputation invoking the emergency measures when it wasn't necessary hurt our reputation abroad. And I think it's a cumulative thing. It's a cumulative thing. And I just have to laugh when I see the Foreign Affairs Minister, Jolie, I think her name is, saying, "Oh, we're very concerned about this, and we're going to say something." Well, I mean, come on, they're buzzing us, they're treating us with no respect, they're giving us the finger, for God's sake.
Well, and putting other pilots
in. We don't have any F-18s to defend our boys. It's too far away. It's too far away. We don't, we can't, So those guys are just going to have to sit there and take it, right?
Yeah, and it's got to be humiliating for the military. I mean, for the members serving, and they got a tough job as it is. And as I said, it's dangerous. I mean, I am no expert. When you get planes within 10 feet of each other, though, no matter how skilled both pilots may be, I mean, a terrible accident could happen. And, this shouldn't be taken lightly. But I mean, I can envision, with Canada, we're not a militarized country, and we don't have a large force, and that's fine. But you would think in that sort of situation, then you'd want a smaller but high-tech and up-to-date specialized force then. I mean, what we have is a small force that's all trying to work with antiques. I mean, their sidearms are World War II era, for crying out loud, and the government can't even figure out how to replace those.
Well, and that's a very good point. All our military equipment is old and outdated. Our destroyers, for example, can't go into ice-filled waters. They can't. Their hulls can't handle it. And our auroras are old. And yes, the government has put in $252 million towards Arctic and NORAD, security, but that's a drop in the bucket. That's nothing, and we are so far behind on that. We simply cannot defend our north. I mean, even the Rangers are not trained. I found out that the Rangers are not trained in tactical, training. I was so shocked to find that out, that they're. I mean, our troops, our armed forces are world class. Our pilots are world class. We stack up against the best in the world, absolutely, no question, and yet we're not supporting them. And it's always been like that, and especially the Liberals. The Liberals have always been they hate to give any money to the military. And we need these new aircraft to replace, the Auroras, the Poseidon, which is basically a 737 converted into a surveillance long range maritime surveillance aircraft, which with multiple capabilities. And only now April 1 was the deadline for information to submit against in the competition. But the Poseidon pretty much will probably be the one we choose, because there's hundreds of offsets, hundreds of industrial offsets, which our economy needs. And also getting back to the Quad Summit and also AUKUS, those countries, Australia, UK, all these countries have set up all these high-tech sectors for technology, which will benefit all those countries. India, Japan, it'll benefit all of them. High-tech sectors, and we are being left out of it, which is just terrible. And on the heels of Mr. Morneau's comments yesterday about how Canada is losing its competition, we're technologically and our economical competition, we're falling by the wayside. And this is and I think he's right. I think he's totally right. And I never liked Morneau. I never did. But on this one, I think he's right. And we are falling behind, and we have a lot to catch up on. We haven't even signed the F-35 deal. That deal is going to be signed we're still negotiating that for 88 jets, supposed to be signed in the fall. We still haven't. And there are like 14 countries that are already ordered it and flying it. We are the last, we're the laggard. We're always the laggard. And I just don't understand why we don't think that's important. Do we always just depend on the Americans, the American defensive umbrella? Don't we? I mean, are we not, it just doesn't make any sense.
No, and it's frustrating, especially with a country as large as ours and with as much border to have to deal with, and the potential insecurity we have in a lot of ways.
Yes.
As I said, even if we could have enough out there that we command respect, it translates to more than military. I mean, when you have these foreign summits, trade deals can be arranged or other bilateral actions. So when your prime minister is shut out by every serious leader in the world, you just can't make those bigger deals. It costs us on a lot more levels than just militarily, and people don't realize that.
It's a major setback. These are major setbacks, and we should have jumped into the F-35 sooner. I mean, there's the whole question of interoperability with our allies is super important. I mean, all you got to do is look at what's happening in Ukraine. Is Putin going to turn his eyes on the Arctic? What's he going to do next? We got to jump on it before it gets out of hand. And I like I say, the 252 million is just a drop in the bucket. That's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. But it's what what the Liberal government is ready to do. That's it.
See what happens, I guess. Speaking of international trade, though, before I let you go, so I hear you're going to be making quite a trip to a pretty unique show in Paris pretty soon.
Yes. I'm going to a show called Satori, and it's the biggest arms show in the world. And they haven't had one for 2 years because of COVID, but they're relaunching it this year. And I'm really looking forward to it. Everybody except the Russians will be there. I understand a few companies from China will also be there, but not very many. And it's because of COVID, this COVID situation in China. It's nothing to do with Ukraine, but the Russians will not be allowed. But everybody else will be. And it is a massive, massive show with all the latest weaponry, drones, helicopters, tanks, you name it. It's going to be there. And I'm really excited to see this. And I hope to maybe we can do a segment from Paris for your show. Hopefully we can tell the listeners here what Satori is about and some of the cool things that are happening in that world of the military industrial world.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can set something up. It sounds like it'll be very interesting for sure. I mean, if not, I'm going to try and get you while you're there. And if not, we'll talk when you get back. But it's good to know there'll be at least one responsible Canadian presence at the show, if nobody else.
I'll be there. I'll hold the fort.
Right on. Okay, well, thanks for checking in, and thanks for keeping us up to date on these things with those columns, Dave. And I hope we didn't distress your cat too much this time around. And
okay. And one more thing. Go see Top Gun. It's fabulous. It's
The new one.
incredible. It's fabulous. I've never seen anything like it. Go see it, and go see it on the IMAX. It's fabulous.
Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind. I got to admit, I'm usually pretty leery of sequels, especially that far after, but sometimes they can do a good one, so I appreciate the heads up on it.
Okay.
Right on. Good talk to Dave.
Okay, take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. So that's our Dave Makichuk. Yes, he writes a lot on our international issues and military and things like that. And I mean, I didn't even know about that. I can only watch so many things at once. But the stories were about, but not so much like just realizing they're actually mocking us in the air. They're making fun of us, and dangerously. I mean, our military personnel. And I mean, hey, come on, it's not an easy or well-paying job working out in the military. You're putting things at risk, but they shouldn't be put unduly at risk, particularly because they're flying antiques around out there on an exercise when, and just not commanding any respect. I mean, the other aspect too is even if they had an older, piece of equipment on one of these exercises, if it was a country that was respected, they still wouldn't pull that sort of thing with them. But if Canada, it's Canada. Come on, those guys elect idiots. They have old ancient military hardware. It doesn't matter if we can have some fun with them. I mean, what's going to happen? And they're right. So got to bring these things to light, and maybe at some point, we'll turn over that goofball we have for a prime minister. I'm not sure what it's going to take. I just hope that the impetus for change up there doesn't come when a Canadian pilot or a number of service members end up getting hurt or killed in one of these incidents or something like that. It would be tragic. It seems with so many things in life, we wait until things really hit the fan, though, before we change anything. Okay, let's look back at some of the comments here. I see Kenny Benson said most people don't want to work in the oil patch. Just kind of going back to the past subjects. For two reasons: the cyclical ups and downs, and the government's been threatening for years to kill the patch. Why go to a dying industry? And he's right. Like, that's part of why I left. I was in the patch from the start of the 90s all the way until, close to, about 2014. And it was 2014. And the ups and downs I went through in 97, and people seem to forget that oil prices went all the way down to under $10 a barrel at that point. We had a real bad slowdown, 97, 98. And then it happened again in 2008. Everything went in the toilet. And then 2014, things went in the toilet. So then I thought I'll really punish myself and bought a bar, and I never went back to the oil industry again. So those cycles, I mean, it's hard. It's a hard living to make. You're in and out, it's hard on families, it's hard on relationships. It's not a bad industry altogether. I mean, I didn't do it for over 20 years because I hated it, but it's not for everybody. And just getting back to, again, with our foolish government thinking people, it's an unskilled thing or people can just come and go. Not at all the case, of course. So let's see here. What else have we got in the comments section here? Of course, not much love for Trudeau, but that doesn't really surprise anybody around here. And Trudeau showed the world that's a lot of it, just a lot. It doesn't have to cost a lot to earn respect. It doesn't. Harper didn't spend a whole pile extra, or more than the Liberals did. I don't think he got spending as much as I wish he could have. But he was respectable. You didn't shudder when Stephen Harper flew overseas to meet with foreign leaders or when he was welcoming them here. You weren't worried about awkward moments like Trudeau with his little weird three-way handshake he tried to do years ago with Obama and some others. Like, everything for Justin's just a photo op. He's all hair, socks, and idiocy. And the foreign leaders know it. They know it. So, sure, they'll party it up with them at times, but when it comes to serious talk, when it comes to leading countries, when it comes to military actions, we're on the outside looking in, because you can't take a country seriously who has a leader that can't be taken seriously. And it's riding all the way down to every level. As I said, it's not just the military. When we are shut out of those international meetings, when we aren't taken seriously at them, we lose out on all sorts of other trade and business opportunities, and we're out of the mix. As Makichuk told me there, it was a surprise when we found out we were shut out of some of those deals. They didn't even know they were going on. Yeah, they don't even talk to us. How embarrassing. It's just embarrassing, and it's sad. It really is. We don't have to be that way. But then, again, we got a government also that not only is inept and vacuous like Trudeau, it lies to us chronically. And the main minister of liars is Safety Minister Marco Mendicino. Here's another story popping up. Yet another police force has said, no, we did not ask you to use the Emergency Powers Act. Well, who did? I mean, so 11 times that minister's claimed over and over. We did it because the police needed us to. We stepped on Canadian individual rights because the police demanded it of us. We invoked a modern-day version of the War Measures Act because there was no other way to take care of this because the police said otherwise. 11 times he said that. He lied to our faces 11 times. And now another one's come up. Another one testifying at a House Affairs Committee. This was a former police chief, said, no, they never recommended the use of the act. Never. Simple words. And it was straight to a straight-up question. Did you, yourself, or anyone in the Ottawa Police Service request it? He said, I did not make the request. I'm not aware of anybody else in the service making the request. This government doesn't care what we think. They'll lie to our faces, and they get away with it. That's the problem. We let them get away with it. So I don't know what it's going to take to fix it. I mean, they still love him in Montreal, Toronto, some parts of Lower Mainland Vancouver, and that's enough. That's enough to win. But we're on a bad train, you know. So I mean, again, speaking of respect, the government doesn't respect us. You know, they don't trust us with the truth. They won't respect our individual rights. This country is broken. Getting through the news a little further, you know, Cabinet hides $240 million. So this is the report that the Cabinet is concealing the cost of a landmark bill, that would extend bilingualism to the private sector. This is from the Parliamentary Budget Office. So they say the costs were more than $250 million. We can't tell because they're hiding it. It's our money. You know, it's our money. The default should be open data, and then they have to justify if they have to hide anything from us. It's our money. Instead, they obfuscate, they hide things, they lie to us, and then we got to battle through committees. We've got to get court orders. We've got to use freedom of information requests to find out these things. And so here's some of the stuff anyways from the budget report saying they expect private compliance costs to implement these rights. It's not a friggin' right. To be $240 million in one-time costs and $20 million a year. I mean, again, remember, this is the government. We'll go back to the gun registry in the 90s when they said that was going to cost, I think 100 or 200 million. It cost over $2 billion by the time they were done with it. What they want to do, and that, you know, it's not just the money they're spending that's the problem, but it's an indication of their arrogance and indifference that they won't share it with us, you know, or tell us what it's about or how much it is. But they want to force bilingualism in private businesses. Think about this, you guys. This is stupid. This is ridiculous on the top level. So they want to force private businesses, airports, banks, grain mills, shippers, railways, trucking companies. They'll all have to have Frenchmen on board. Or women, French speakers. Why? Why? Why does a trucker between Alberta and Saskatchewan need to speak French? Why does a person working in a bank in northern BC need to speak French? This pandering at great expense to Quebec and their personal insecurities as a culture is costing us a fortune. And now they're going after the private market. It's bad enough that they forced posties and other federal, you know, branches of the government to do this, but now they're going after the private market. And it's absurd. And again, if we're going to have multiple languages, fine, I can respect those. Let's have them respect the reality. And I tell you what, French in Calgary for unilingual speakers is so far down, there's probably 25 other languages ahead of it. I'd rather see Cantonese or Hindi or, you know, Punjabi. There's many, many languages spoken around here far before French. But because of this federal government, they're going to intrude further. And you see what this does. This is this broken country, this Laurentian elitist country that keeps shoving everything into the center. This will take it outside of the political realm and into the private one. It gets you more beholden to the center, even in the private industries now. You can't escape these guys. And what an advantage it puts it at, of course, right? I mean, there's no advantage to be an English speaker wanting to work in central Canada. And now there's not going to be much advantage of being an English speaker working in Western Canada, because if you're looking at any of these industries that are private, that they want to regulate, you're going to be lower on the line for hiring, lower on the line for promotions, because you don't speak French. Stupid. And this is where they're going, guys. This is what's happening. And not only that, again, of course, it's going to cost $250 million. That's their estimates. We know damn well it'll cost a hell of a lot more than that. There's nothing this government does that comes within budget. Again, they're run by morons. But yeah, you know, getting again back to that statement. So here it was from Labor Minister O'Regan. His remarks following a report that the Cabinet's climate change plan threatens 170,000 energy jobs. He says, we're not transitioning jobs out of the sector. That's what he said. Said this has been his focus since he's taken on the role of labor worker. He says the biggest problem is we don't have enough workers. I mean, again, he's just lying. He's lying. Of course they've been pushing everybody out. They've been telling everybody, get out of it. You're going to go get a job at a windmill. You'll be all right. You don't need that rig training anymore. We don't need those welders. You'll weld solar panels somewhere, or you'll train unicorns because those are the new green jobs that are available for you. But now he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, saying, okay, the oil and gas sector is short of labor. Yes, it's because you idiots drove them out of there. Don't try and blame someone else, you clown. And they still don't really want people in. I mean, in 2015, they put in legislation for their just transition that was supposed to give these new jobs to oil and gas workers. Well, what happened to it? Where's the jobs, Mr. O'Regan? They're not there. But what we've also got now, so we don't have this green shift, this great transition, but we have an energy sector that's short of skilled labor while the world's in an energy crisis. We're paying $2 a liter for gas in Canada while we sit on the third most generous oil and gas reserves in the world. It's ridiculous. But they will not face reality. You know, getting back to respect and getting back to people, Trudeau's cabinet, unfortunately, very much reflects Trudeau. They're stupid. And I mean, the thing is, he surrounds himself with his peers, and that's what he's been doing. This has not been a cabinet full of luminaries here, guys. O'Regan, everybody's known he's been something of a twit. And then, Makichuk brought up, Jolie, she's our foreign affairs minister. Holy cow. I mean, who can forget, of course, Catherine McKenna, when she was in there. He brings... You're supposed to try and bring in the best and brightest in cabinet because they're taking on important roles. And these are guys that I wouldn't trust to be a middle manager in a bloody Walmart. But I think it's because of the insecurity of the prime minister. I mean, the thing is, you don't want to be outdone. It's like the vain, shallow girl going to the bar who'd want to make sure she had a couple unattractive friends with her all the time, hoping she'll look a little better. Well, Trudeau keeps himself surrounded by idiots, hoping that maybe it'll mask his own vacuous lack of ability when it comes to any kind of nuanced policy discussions. And that's what his cabinet is. Man, we've got a grim future looking ahead of us. All right, I see our panel coming in. We'll get me off of rant mode for a bit, and let's talk and see what they've been doing over in Ontario there. The election is done. Ford's back in, stronger than ever. Let's have a chat with Matthew Horwood and Jonathan Bradley about what that means and what's going on out there. So let's bring them on in here. And hey, guys, how you doing out there in the East?
Pretty good.
Well, Cory.
Maybe I guess I'll just get right into it. I'll start first with Jonathan. You guys were obviously watching it. I got to admit I didn't. How did the results go when they were coming in? A lot of elections lately have always had, hiccups and slow results and things hanging there. Did this actually go pretty smoothly?
The results came in fast. I was at the Ontario PC election results party, and within 10 minutes, it was confirmed that Ford won. And then within 30 minutes, it was confirmed that Ford won a majority. Okay,
so pretty quick. I mean, that's a refreshing. I mean, I know we'd been kind of discussing doing a live special on it, but we just didn't get it quite together on it for here. But that's that fear we've had with past live things with elections that at times they dragged on for hours, and we actually ran out of things to babble about, so it got a little painful. So it's good to see that they got that part through smoothly, at least. Anyways, so Matthew, I didn't write down the predictions from yesterday, but did everything kind of line up as you expected it would?
Yeah, my predictions pretty much all came true. Ford, he's the man. We thought he was going to win. He was looking ahead in the polls, but I don't think I predicted just how badly the Liberals and Del Duca were going to do in this election. I mean, as Jonathan said, it was pretty clear early on in the night where this was going. We could see that Del Duca was not doing well in his riding. He was down by about 18 points, which is the same margin that he lost the riding back in 2018. And it was just very clear that the Liberals were not going to have a good night from the get-go. So I'm not surprised that he lost. I'm not surprised that he has stepped down as leader. It's I feel bad for the guy, even though I made some jokes last night that he looks like Dr. Evil. And I think I did a poll and the vast majority agreed that he sort of is an uncanny resemblance to that man. But I do really feel bad for him. He seemed genuine and, he ran a good campaign, but I think the Liberals, Ontarians don't have that sort of memories, and they remember the debt that they were put in under Kathleen Wynne, and they just weren't ready to make the switch back to them.
Yeah, so Del Duca, I mean, yeah, he just got slaughtered in his own constituency. Actually, it wasn't even close in the end, and that was sort of predicted. But I see that Horwath is resigned. Was it, Matthew or Jonathan? Did you kind of expect or see that coming?
I expected to see that coming because it's her fourth election as NDP leader, and eventually you kind of have to know when to step aside. And since she lost seats this election, it seems like a reasonable time to do so. I think that the next leader for the Ontario NDP will be Peter Tabbins. He's the NDP MPP for Toronto Danforth. I suspect that he'll be the next NDP leader because he ran in the previous leadership race.
Okay. So yeah, again, there's going to be a couple of leadership races on the go. I wonder, maybe I'll start with Matthew, like something that might happen. I'm looking at the numbers though. It was like 41%, which still gave Ford a very strong majority. That's what happens in our first past the post system when we have more than two parties going on. But I mean, do you think when it comes to left and center left, you might see a bit of a unity movement? Like that's what happened in Alberta, when we split the right and Notley got in, but maybe there might be leadership candidates with the NDP or Liberals saying, look, we got to unify under one of these or we're never going to get Ford out of there. You anticipate maybe some of that might go on?
For sure. I'm not really in the prediction game, but you could see them, the Liberals and the NDP, working together at this point. It would make more sense than going after each other and being at each other's throats when Ford is just kind of staying in the background, being very quiet. And that's kind of how he slided a victory. He didn't go out there and do a lot of press conferences. His handlers were very cautious about having him do interviews and say anything more than he needed to say. So I think that was a good strategy for him, was just to lay low, to talk about his legacy and what he's going to do to build highways and get it done, as he said, build infrastructure. That was the right move. But going back to your question, I do think it would be wise for the Liberals and the NDP to try and do something similar to what has been going on the federal level and have an alliance. But again, we got a long time before the next election, and who knows what can happen between then and there,
Oh yeah, and then I mean it's just and there's always going to be. I don't think they'll ever merge or come formally together even as parties. But when you got parallel leadership races going on, I could see that as a time when individual candidates might push that. I mean, people with party allegiances, like in Alberta, the Liberal Party here under their last leader, I think they got something like 1% or something. It was that much of a slaughter, and they've had opportunities to merge with other center-left parties in Alberta, and they still said, no, we can't do it. We got to hold on to our brand. And that shows how stubborn some people can be with party brand. But at least, the bottom line is the members and the supporters fled the party because they wouldn't be pragmatic. So, I'm just thinking as these leadership races emerge, as Jonathan, you said, there's already an NDP kind of contender, but maybe others will come out along the lines of just trying to talk about more of a unity on the left.
Yeah, that could be possible. With the Ontario Liberals, their leadership race, I have a feeling that the next Ontario Liberal leader will be Bonnie Crombie, the Mississauga mayor. I have a friend of mine who is pretty involved in Ontario politics, and he was telling me that Bonnie Crombie has been already fundraising for a potential run to become the next Ontario Liberal leader. So I wouldn't be surprised if she entered.
Okay, then in the Green Party, of course, they maintained their one seat comfortably, but there was another one, I don't have that on hand, I think, where they came really perilously close to winning another seat out there. The Greens just aren't a factor again out here at all, well, until you get to BC. Do you think, Matthew, like, have they got room to grow as a presence, or will they just kind of stay with their one or two seats?
I don't think they're going to become a very large force on the provincial stage. The problem with the Greens that I've seen is that a lot of their policies are very forward-thinking, but they kind of get stolen or co-opted by the NDP and the Liberals. And they're also, of course, basically a one-issue party for the most part of the environment, which just doesn't. It's not as sexy as some of the other issues that were talked about during the campaign. And we saw, the talk of the highway that was going to be built, the big. The NDPs and Liberals were saying, well, it's going to go through this green space and it's going to destroy a lot of habitat. But then I think for the average Ontario voter, they don't like being in traffic. They want more infrastructure. They want to be able to get from point A to point B a lot quicker. So caring about the environment is just secondary to bigger issues of quality of life, of affordability, of, just living good lives. And that's the problem with the Greens and why I don't think that they're going to become a really big force in Ontario. Yeah, well, it's hard to worry that much about the birds and the bees if you can't pay the rent. So at times you can get those luxuries of voting for things like that, but times like now it's a little more difficult and on a fringe.
So maybe, Jonathan, the other thing, though, speaking of alternative parties, or if you'd want to call them fringe or whatnot, the other two newcomers on the right didn't really make any inroads last night, did they?
No, New Blue and the Ontario Party didn't pick up any seats. For New Blue, Belinda Carahelios lost her seat in Cambridge. It went to the PC candidate, and Jim Carahelios didn't win his seat in Kitchener-Conestoga. It went to the PC MPP. And then with the Ontario Party, same thing. Derek Sloan didn't win a seat in Hastings, Lennox, and Addington, and Rick Nichols didn't win his seat in Chatham, Leamington, Kent. There was an independent candidate, though. This was kind of surprising to me. Her name's Bobby Ann Brady. She won the seat in Haldimand, Norfolk. She worked as the executive assistant to the former PC MPP, Toby Barrett. I hadn't even heard of her until election day, but it was interesting seeing that area on the map go great because typically Haldimand, Norfolk is a conservative stronghold.
So Matthew, I mean, in that case with the independent too, I mean, that must have been a heck of a campaign. I mean, if it came in under the radar, it's rare for an independent to win anywhere, anytime in our system, and to have somebody do it quietly, whereas people didn't see it coming even, what happened there? How did this, do you know much about that anomaly?
Absolutely. That was totally out of left field. I certainly didn't know that was going to happen. But you look at her history and it makes sense. I mean, she was the executive assistant to Conservative MPP Tony Barrett for 23 years. She was a provincial and national gold medalist in kickboxing. You read on her website, she was really presented herself as an outsider candidate and outside of traditional political spheres. So I think she must have run a very interesting campaign. I'm going to be speaking with her at 3:00 this afternoon, and I'm going to ask her about how she managed to pull that off, because that's really something. I really want to know how she managed that.
Yeah, well, it's those outliers are certainly more interesting than seeing others who kind of slid in with the party bunch. I mean, something else, I noted yesterday, I think you guys weren't on at the time, but there's that trend Ontario tends to have, which seems that they elect a party that whatever is the opposite of the federal government, they're going to put in provincially. It's like they want to hedge their bets. When the Conservatives were in, they put a Liberal into the legislature, and when the Liberals are in, they'll put the Conservatives in. Is this a conscious thing, Jonathan, or is it just the way it kind of happens, you think?
Well, I was actually listening back to what you said earlier, and I was like, Cory's like, I don't think Cory's accurate. And then when I actually went and looked, I was like, oh, Cory was right. One interesting point to build on that, when I was at the Ontario PC watch party, when Ford came on stage to give his victory speech, he talked about how if you voted for the federal Liberals, there's room for you in our party, which was interesting to hear because it's like, oh, wow, like you're really trying to make like a big tent and include people who might not see themselves in the Ontario PC party.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, a federal government always just provides a convenient foil for somebody to campaign against. I mean, it gives you a boogeyman you can point at, whether it's Liberal on one end or Conservative on the other. I imagine we're going to see a lot of that in Alberta. Of course, it's always an open game to campaign against the federal Liberal government more effectively than campaigning against even your local opponents sometimes. So perhaps, I mean, a bit of that was in play. I mean, how's Matthew, like, what's the relationship between Ford and the Liberals these days federally?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. I was just kind of threw that out, but I was just wondering, I mean, what kind of relationship is there between the Ford government and the federal Liberals? Like, I know they have their ups and downs, and it's a Liberal and a Conservative, but still, it doesn't mean they're totally at each other's throats. I mean, does it seem to be they'll be productive going forward?
Yeah, it's certainly a productive relationship. I would argue it's not been as bad as Jason Kenney and the Liberals. There's not as much of disagreement there, but I mean, certainly they're working together. They're seeing past their political differences and they're getting things done. I mean, Ontario is the most populous, most economically important province, so the Trudeau is going to have to get along. That's my take on that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Doug Ford certainly, I mean, he has a strong mandate now. You can't deny that. The people have spoken electorally as far as that goes. So I guess as I wrap things up, Jonathan, what do you think we got to look forward to? Do you think there's any big cabinet changes or new initiatives or anything like that coming out of this government?
Well, one big change to watch is who's going to become the deputy premier. So Christine Elliott, who was the deputy premier under Ford in the last term, she didn't seek re-election. I suspect that the new deputy premier will be Paul Calandra, who's the minister of long-term care minister right now. And I think it'll be him because he has some cabinet experience. Another big change that I'm really looking forward to watching is if they keep Stephen Lecce on as education minister. He took a ton of flack from teachers' unions during the teacher strikes in 2020. I'm not too sure who they would replace him with. Maybe Ross Romano. He's a strong cabinet minister. He's in, I think he's in infrastructure now. I'm not 100% sure though, but I think he might replace Lecce in education.
Great. And Matthew, just kind of closing things up, what do you think we can look forward to in the next couple of months from this government? Or I guess probably they won't do much till fall, but all the same, what mandates he going to go ahead with?
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty quiet. I mean, he's going to go forward with the spending on infrastructure, a little bit towards hospitals and schools, not a whole lot. I think it's going to happen. The question will be how he responds to the growing crises, of rising food costs, inflation, potential of another pandemic. If monkeypox ends up being a big thing, I know some of the attention has gone away from that, but there's always seems to be this talk of another pandemic lurking. So I think Ford's going to have a lot more issues to really deal with, and he might just be on the defensive for a lot of these things. And so he's definitely going to have his work cut out for him.
Great. Well, we'll be watching with interest from out here, and I appreciate you guys being out there to report and keep us up to date on it. So thanks for joining me again today. I'll let you get back to following up. Sounds like that interview is going to be pretty interesting, Matthew, with that independent, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Cory.
For sure. Thanks, Cory.
Thanks. So that was Jonathan Bradley and Matthew Horwood, both writers for the Western Standard Online, our Ontario crew out there. I just like to remind everybody, we're not purely Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, that sort of thing. I mean, hey, Ontario's important too, even if we get pissed off at them all the time. All right, so let's see. I got to get on to another sponsor here, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Again, these guys, you've heard me talk about them a lot, and their name sort of says what they're all about. They're an association for people who enjoy firearms, or if you're looking to get into purchasing firearms. I know a lot of people are suddenly scrambling out trying to get handguns before the full ban on transference happens. Of course, if you don't have an RPAL, you won't be able to do it quickly. Either way, their name sort of says what they're about. It's got a lot of resources there at the CSSA, videos, links to trade shows, links to events, news items that impact firearms. Basically everything firearms. Also things on safe use, or trap shooting, target shooting, collecting, all of those things. Because, I mean, they're all lawful, perfectly legal, reasonable hobbies to have. But you got to stand up for them. We got a government that wants to take it away from you. They want to take your property. They want to reduce your rights. And if you don't stand up for yourself, they're going to get away with it. So check these guys out. That's how you stand up for yourselves. You got to do it together. It's one thing we got to learn from the left. I don't want to learn a lot from them, but they do know that you've got to organize and you've got to act together if you want to get things done. So the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, that's what they do. Take out a membership with them if you value your firearms. It's well worth it. CSSA-CILA.org. All right, we've got a guest in studio. As I said, it's a pretty packed day today, and that's Peter McCaffrey with Common Sense Calgary, and we're going to talk about the way I framed it is just insanity. This climate plan, I mean, I expected bad, but I thought it had to be a typo. $87 billion?
Yeah, I mean, insanity could probably explain most of what happens at City Hall, but in this case, it's particularly apt. $87 billion on climate. I also thought it was a typo. I thought it was $87 million. Basically, the city administration, the bureaucrats working at City Hall, have gone down the rabbit hole of climate change, come up with every single possible thing they could think of, put it all on their wish list, and said to council, gimme, right? And the bill comes to $87 billion. That's what they think it will cost to get Calgary to net zero by 2050, which is the in vogue thing at the moment. And to be clear, $87 billion is about $175,000 per Calgary household. So that's why this is just, I mean, even if it was $17,500, even if it was $1,750, that's ridiculous. $175,000 per household.
And a number of council members are saying, this is fantastic. Let's get going. Let's get rolling. I mean, they aren't floored by this. I just can't believe this. I mean, not only that, that's the cost of implementing, but they aren't measuring the cost of the commerce and people they're going to drive out of this city if they really actually move forward with this.
Right. Well, and I think this is perhaps the problem at City Hall. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time. It's just the complete lack of understanding about economics, about how you calculate the costs of things, about cost-benefit analyses, any kind of like rational analysis of the pros and cons of projects, right? In theory, what you should be doing when a plan is proposed, you should be figuring out, well, what are the benefits of the project? What are the costs of the project? Do the benefits outweigh the costs? Ideally, you do that with a whole bunch of different alternatives. So you're not just testing whether the benefits outweigh the costs, but is this actually the best use of this money or these resources? And then you go ahead with the best option. What these guys seem to do is just figure out what the benefits are and then ask people to pay for it. There's nothing, right? It's insane.
Well, and again, I worry because, I mean, we've got, a flight of capital from this city. This has been happening for a while. We got a hollowed out downtown. Right. And they do seem to recognize it's a problem, but with the usual approach of my favorite little organization, Calgary Economic Development, and their slush fund that brought in such great things as rocket space and other failed ventures. And we're also seeing a trend of businesses just setting up on the outskirts of Calgary. I mean, the MD of Rocky View has been the recipient of a lot of business as well. I don't know what happened with that Amazon data center or something like that. They announced it, being this giant venture and it's going to bring in jobs, but they never would say exactly where it's going to be. And from what I could suspect, it's not going to be in the city.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure that one out as well, and they've been very tight-lipped on that. And I suspect the reason they don't want to say where it's going to be is because it's not going to be in the city limits, and so that defeats all of their arguments about how amazing it is for the city of Calgary. It's obviously good for Alberta, but there's a good reason why it's not going in Calgary, and that's because of the cost of doing business in Calgary. But again, it's just yet another example of where they add up the benefits of everything they want to do, and then they minimize the costs as much as possible, and then go, look, see, this is a great idea. We should do it. You saw in the newspaper the day after the announcement about this. Well, the city bureaucrats are warning, well, if you don't do this, it could cost more.
Oh, that.
I mean, maybe like if you, but this is the problem, right? They're willing to count the direct costs and the direct benefits, and then they throw in all these ridiculous ancillary potential hypothetical benefits to society, which some may be fair enough, some might not be. That you can basically make a cost benefit analysis, say whatever you want now with all of those things.
Oh yeah.
But if you're going to include all those ancillary sort of indirect benefits, you have to also include the indirect costs, which is, as you say, hey, if we take $175,000 from every family, that's $175,000 that they can't spend in the city and city businesses and growing the economy in Calgary. There's no free money. The money that the city spends isn't magical new money that they've invented out of nowhere. That's what the federal government does. The city of Calgary can't do that. They have to take the money from taxpayers first before they spend it. So every dollar they spend and every benefit that they get from spending that money has an equal, if not worse, cost on the other end when they take the money in the first place. And they just ignore that.
Yeah, and it seems that in my view, I mean, they're fabricating the cost of not doing something. I mean, fine, people are concerned you want to do some things, but two things, for example. I mean, for one, what on earth is going to happen in the next decade and some that's going to cost us $87 billion and changes? I mean, are the sea levels that never did rise are suddenly going to start become rising and crest the Rocky Mountains and actually flood Calgary? Or, the sun gets so darn hot in the next few years that we'll have complete desertification? Because that's what it'll take to get to those levels of what they're talking about.
The thing is, some of the things they're proposing aren't even necessarily bad ideas, right? Like, no one in theory is opposed to the idea of more efficient buildings that require less electricity. Why? Because that gets your costs down, right? If you're a business owner and you're building some kind of facility or some kind of building, you want to do so in a way that can keep your costs down. But if you ignore the cost of actually upgrading the building, which is what they're trying to do, right? Well, then that doesn't start to look very good, right? So, what else? They also want 60% of all trips in the city to be done by walking, wheeling, or transit by 2050. Which, again, it's just this top-down culture of, well, we're gonna tell you how you're gonna live your life and what's best for you, and we're gonna make you pay for it as well.
Well, they're saying, I mean, it's a term I wish would come back more because it was a big term in the past. It's social engineering.
Right.
They feel that it's their role as elitists to tell us how to behave ourselves, how we lead our lives, and what we'll do. And they want 2/3 of this city to not own personal vehicles. That's their ideological bent, and they want to use policy in order to force that.
Well, and the great irony is that the fact that they need to propose these ideas is proof that their ideas don't work. Because in theory, we're supposed to have a carbon tax. And the carbon tax is supposed to incentivize people to do the right thing according to the environment, right? So with a carbon tax, that should be using a price mechanism, as their argument goes, encouraging people to do the right thing in the first place. It should be encouraging people to walk or bike instead of drive. It should be encouraging people to upgrade their facilities and their buildings to be more energy efficient. The fact that they're going to have to come in and have the government mandate and pay for this through taxes just proves that the incentive scheme that they implemented through the carbon tax doesn't actually work. So we've got one policy of theirs that doesn't work. And then because it doesn't work, they're going to propose another policy. And I predict this one won't work either. And then they're going to come up with another one. And all that's happening is Calgarian taxpayers are paying over and over and over again for more and more failed policies.
Well, that's it. I mean, BC's been a good example. They've had a carbon tax for a long time out there now. And the numbers year after year after year, it has not impacted the emissions. And that's part of the other thing as well. I mean, even if they managed to blow this 87 billion and, you know, common sense doesn't somehow come into them by that point. And even if all of those policies come into being and they really have that much transit and that many people, the impact it will actually have on the climate is going to be pretty negligible.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that it will probably end up being more than $175,000 because it's so their argument is that they're going to try and get the province and the federal government to pay for some of this, which, okay, fine. And on first glance, that might sound like a good idea. We can have somebody else pay for it rather than Calgary taxpayers.
In the end.
But exactly, yeah. If you're a Calgary taxpayer, guess what? You pay provincial and federal taxes. Now, if you're a Montreal taxpayer and you get the provincial or the federal government to pay for something, especially the federal government, that's actually a benefit to you because what that means is Alberta taxpayers are subsidizing whatever it is that the federal government is paying for a Montreal taxpayer. But if the provincial and federal government are subsidizing something for the Calgary municipality, well, you can bet that they're going to do the same thing for all the other cities around the country as well. And Alberta and Calgary taxpayers subsidize taxpayers in the rest of the country. So we're not only going to be paying the $87 billion to do this in Calgary, we're going to be paying more through our federal taxes to help other cities do this as well.
The economic horror cycle just kind of continues.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, is there any chance of heading this off? I mean, right now it's just a policy proposal. It's being embraced by Gondek and a few of the members of council, but it doesn't mean it's been passed or implemented. I mean, can opposition start rising and amend this thing or scrap it or anything of the sort?
I mean, yes. We have a petition on the Common Sense Calgary website, commonsensecalgary.com, where we're encouraging people to get involved and just, like you said, organize. We don't want to learn any lessons from the left-wingers, but we can definitely learn some organizing lessons, and that's what we're trying to do on this issue. And the more people we can get to sign that petition, the more people we can get to realize that this is just a completely insane idea, the more that will help. But we also have to recognize that, this is a long, ongoing battle. They did exactly the same thing with the Green Line. First, the Green Line was just a policy proposal, and it was just a hypothetical, and there were just some random costings, and then eventually through the levers of government, the wheels churn and churn over time, and it's just this just has its own momentum, right? So we really need not just to be opposing one-off things like this, but really getting the average Calgarian to have a better understanding of what's happening at City Hall and how we can stop some of these things in the long run.
Well, we have to engage as voters more with our municipal politics. That was something I was getting a bit chiding yesterday when I ranted about this, or maybe the day before. But part of the issue is we have terrible voter turnouts when it comes to municipal elections. It's not just Calgary, it's across the world. We pay close attention to the federal and provincial actions, and we overlook the government that's actually closest to us, and we don't pay close attention. And that's how we elect some people that, after they've been in for a while, you scratch his head. How the heck did that person get in there?
I think part of the problem is a lot of people look at municipal government and they think, well, it's fixing potholes and it's collecting the garbage and
that's what they're
basic
supposed
stuff
to
like
do.
that. And you're right, that's what they're supposed to do. The reality of municipal governments now is they do social welfare and housing and climate change, and they've become massive, ginormous entities that collect huge amounts of taxes. And people are still acting as if they're these tiny little organizations that have barely any impact on their lives, when actually, hey, guess what? They can propose something tomorrow that costs you $175,000 per household. And theoretically, there's no reason, there's no legislative mechanism to stop them from doing that. It's just the will of the voters and the activity and the energy of people to get out there and make their voices heard. That's the only thing that can stop them from doing that.
Yeah, and this ridiculous plan, it's supposed to happen over the next 28 years, though, it'll be very costly right off the bat. But I mean, time, I guess it doesn't have to, it's not a done deal. No matter what even this administration says, it doesn't have to be a done deal. Things that, I mean, they put out stuff like Imagine Calgary. That thing, I waded through that horrific document years ago. Right. And I mean, it was, well, basically, it was laying out what this plan is today in a lot of ways. There were crazy pie in the sky ideas and things. And people forgot that Nenshi actually said he's going to model his plans after that.
Well, and you're right. It's over a long period of time. I think 28 years, by 2050 is what they're trying to achieve. But let's not forget that still works out to more than like $20,000 per household per year, right? It's just insane. Sorry, I don't think it's 20,000. I haven't got the number in front of me, but it's tens of thousands of dollars per household per year, even if you stretch it out over the year. So it's just fanciful, the idea. But what you said there, the Imagine Calgary and all the other strategies and documents, that is how they do it. They start very, very high level. This is all hypothetical. Just, we're just proposing some ideas. And then they come up with some plans. And then they get council to vote for a policy. It's just guiding policy. It's no specifics. But then when they propose specifics, anybody who tries to oppose it, they then say, well, why would you be opposed to this? We've already got a policy. We've already got a strategy. We already agreed to that. You've already committed to this. You have to do this because this is what we already committed to. Yeah. And so it's that ratchet effect, just little by little by little by little. They say, don't worry, this isn't going to be anything too dramatic. You're not committing anything. You're not committing to anything long-term here. And then they flip the switch and they say, well, you've already committed. You've already committed to this. You've already agreed to this. You've already spent all this money. We've already committed to this plan. Why would we turn back now, right? That's
what gets me too. Yeah, with the frog and water and the sunk money. That's part of how they did a bit of the Green Line too. Well, look, we spent all this already. We have to finish this thing now.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the sunk cost fallacy, except it is the city administration deliberately using the sunk cost fallacy as a strategy to get buy-in for their plans.
Well, and they use these things too, especially if suddenly we get the federal government comes in, Justin Trudeau, it wouldn't shock me. He's gonna come and say, yeah, I'll kick in 10 billion on that. And I know exactly what city council do. They'll come back and say, look, if anybody opposes this now, you're throwing away $10 billion. Right. You're going to be just burning it up and throwing it in the garbage. Right. Yeah. So we have to impose this or we won't get that $10 billion.
And the federal government do the same to the province as well, right? That's how we ended up with the childcare deal, right? The federal government took over childcare last year. Barely anybody noticed because if the provincial government had opposed the plan, they would have been giving up billions of dollars, right? But that's another thing. We have to start explaining to Calgarians and to Albertans that all of these like matching funds deals from the federal government are actually a bad deal for us because it's not like they're only giving Calgary or only giving Alberta the money. They're doing it for everyone else as well. And we subsidize everyone else. So we should be trying to get rid of all those matching things. And, Calgary taxpayers can pay for Calgary stuff and Edmonton taxpayers can pay for Edmonton stuff and Alberta can pay for Alberta and everyone else can pay for everyone else.
Yeah, it's just bad policy. And that. As a leader, if you go dangling that, it's like a household, it's one of the kids there. Well, you got to give it to the other ones too, or you're going to have some problems, particularly if those kids are as loud as Montreal.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, well, so much to go into. Since I've got you here, maybe explain a little bit about what Common Sense Calgary is. I didn't really introduce you very well to begin with, and I know there's a lot more you're working on than just this climate plan. It's just that this one just really brought the municipal thing to bear because it's just so over the top.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I alluded to before, Common Sense Calgary follows what's happening at City Hall and tries to bring attention to it for Calgarians so that Calgarians can be more informed about what is going on in our municipal government, right? And what we've been talking about today about the climate plan is how they operate on almost every issue, right? They add up all the benefits, they ignore all the costs, and then they talk about how amazing all their plans will be, and anybody who opposes it would be crazy. And we're there to point out, well, hang on, that's not always how it works. You have to consider both the costs and the benefits. You have to consider the other side of the story. You have to consider other factors and alternatives. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring more attention to what's happening at City Hall, help people have a better understanding of all of these proposals that are being brought forward, and make sure that people are aware of what the councillors are doing, what the mayor is doing, what's happening in those meetings, what happens in the committee meetings, what's buried on page 374 of the report that they don't want you to see, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, and that's important. I mean, that's part of why, for example, I like Blacklock's report, or as we do with the Western Standard. But one of the things that Blacklock's does a lot, actually, they follow those committee meetings, they dig into those policy things on our behalf, and then we can get the Coles Note version, because not everybody has the time to mire through that. So, and City Hall loves doing that too. I mean, obviously, hide something in a big giant report and it's buried in the middle, and the public can forget about it. So, I mean, bringing that to attention at least catches them in the act, I guess you could say.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not futile, I mean, pushing back, it might feel like it sometimes, but I think of things like when Gondek jumped out and said, we're going to spend, it wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, I think 121,000 or something, to take part of the challenge, the legal challenge against Bill 21 in Quebec. Well, it's not a matter that it was only 121,000. It's that it was so far out of your jurisdiction that Calgarians got up and said, no, you aren't. Cut it out. And she did. She backed off. I mean,
and regardless of your opinion on that particular bill, it's just not the job of Calgary government
that's it.
to be funding lawsuits in other provinces.
Nobody likes
we
that
wouldn't,
bill out here.
We wouldn't want Montreal to be start funding lawsuits against freedom-loving legislation in Calgary or Alberta, right? So no, it's all about ensuring that people know what's going on, but also advocating for common sense ideas and common sense solutions and solutions to the problems that we have at City Hall, and getting the city back to the core role that it should be focused on, right? People don't mind a municipal government. People don't mind paying taxes to deal with true public good issues like potholes and garbage collection in some cases and things like that, right? Where there's a benefit to having some kind of collective action to come together and do these sorts of things. It's just when the city gets into all this nonsense that people have problems. And you know, I really think one of the main problems we have at City Hall now is that they spend so much time focused on stuff that isn't their job. Not only are they wasting taxpayers' money on all that stuff, but they're also so distracted with that stuff that they're not even doing a good job at the things that are their job.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So we're getting hit both sides. We're getting all of these crazy policies that we have to pay for that nobody wants. And then we're getting really bad service on the things that we should be funding and that most people have no problem paying for.
Yeah, these are managers of billions and billions of dollars, and they can spend an entire day talking about the official bird or who the latest poet laureate's going to be. And meanwhile, major policy issues are being overlooked.
Yeah, and we've got issues with crime on the LRT, and we've got issues with safety, and we've got issues with businesses going out of business because they can't afford their property taxes anymore, and garbage collection and all the kind of basic stuff that the city should be doing isn't working, and yet we've got time, like you said, to deal with a bird or a climate strategy that no one's ever going to be able to pay for or anything like that.
And no one asked for.
Look, I mean, part of the problem is that politicians who are attracted to power and influence as opposed to ideas are attracted to municipal government because historically there's been much less scrutiny, and because there aren't restraints really on what the municipalities can do, right? If you run for provincial government, you can't start creating your own army or negotiating your own trade deals or any of that kind of But if you're running a provincial government, you can't start doing stuff that the federal government's supposed to be doing. But if you're a municipality and you go off and you start building houses and doing climate plans and all that kind of stuff, the province has let municipalities get away with that, and so it's kind of a really easy way for politicians to get in there and influence and push their ideas in a way that they wouldn't be able to do in a provincial or federal government, and they haven't had any pushback or opposition to that until now, and that's what we're trying to do now. Yeah,
well, and that's what we got to do, citizens. And that's just why I wanted to remind everybody, like I said, with that one example with Gonda, because she seems to be very intractable and stubborn sometimes. But you know what? When her finger got burned with that Quebec thing, she backed off.
Right.
So it can happen. It can work if we speak up. If we,
as always, the one thing the politicians are most worried about is getting reelected. And so if we can show them that they're really off base with voters and that people really care about an issue and willing to get out there, then they'll back off. So that's it. The Calgarians have to get involved and get active and encourage them to do so and get in touch with Common Sense Calgary.
And the time starts now. I mean, it's 3.5 years till the next municipal election, but hey, why wait until then? If they're always doing internals, they're always watching. If they think, oh my God, I'm going to be unemployed in 3.5 years, they're going to reevaluate their path.
Yeah, and it also doesn't just have to be the election, right? We can, as you said, we can influence decisions, we can influence what's happening at City Hall, we can get them on a better direction just by having people stand up and say that they care about an issue and they're willing to get involved. It doesn't have to only be elections as well. We can really be advocating on issues every day, not just on election day.
All right, on. Well, thank you again for coming in to talk to us about it and for the work you guys are doing. This is that reminder. It's Common Sense Calgary, and just get online and check them out, guys, and helps keep you up to date. And for the listeners and viewers outside of Calgary, I mean, this is a municipal issue everywhere. Right. There's organizations and there's people or activities, to keep pushing back. Because this is
and there are also common sense groups in Edmonton, Red Deer, Lethbridge, and Medicine Hat as well. There we go. So you can go check out those groups as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, good to see you, Peter. Thanks for coming in. And
thanks so much.
I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Right, so just in review, that was, again, Peter McCaffrey with Common Sense Calgary. Check out their site online and, of course, their social media presence and everywhere else. I like, exposing these things. And as I like to keep pointing out, it's not futile. It feels like it. It feels like you're running into a brick wall sometimes. It feels like you're wasting your time. Look, the only assurance you have is if you do nothing, you'll lose. That, you're guaranteed. So we've got nothing to lose in keeping on it. And I mean, come on, look what these guys think they can get away with dropping a policy that insane upon people. And they didn't do it because they didn't think they could get away with it. They think it's going to happen. So, again, we've got to engage. We've got to keep track or we're going to lose. And that's just a big issue here in Calgary and everywhere, every city. So I'm just going through to see if anything else, monkeypox, here we go again, right? This one I keep seeing. I don't even know what to say or think about it anymore. They just seem to be desperate to find something else to scare people, desperate to get us on edge. Every virologist, it headlines every bit of news. Let's look at the real numbers here. Right now that we know of around the world, 643 cases in countries. Well, I guess it's in countries where it's not endemic. But I mean, out of billions and billions of people we're talking about, 643 cases. You want to watch for things. You want to nip them in the bud, catch them when they're early. But this thing, you listen to every credible virologist and scientist. They say it doesn't transmit easily. This thing is not going to spread like wildfire. It is not going to take over cities or put us at risk. If you're in the high-risk groups or doing high-risk activities, things like that, watch out. We certainly want to keep people aware and have them avoid this if possible. But why is this the bloody headline on every news story then? It's not a big deal because they want us to be scared. They want us to be scared. They always want us to be scared. They can't find something else that they're going to bring out. And that one's scary. Look at that picture of the pox all over you, these things all over your arm. And as somebody else pointed out, yeah, during National Itch Day. But all the same, this is not a headline story yet. Here we go. We keep hearing about it. We're going to keep hearing about it until they can find something new to keep us scared. They use emergencies or perceived emergencies as ways to control us. They've learned during the pandemic that we will allow the government to get away with darn near anything if we think it's for the public safety. So that's when we're going to see gun emergencies. Look what's happening. Climate emergencies. Look what's happening. And of course, new medical emergencies, because then they think they can do anything. All right. So I think I'm going to wrap it up and let you guys go for the weekend. Look, tune in on Monday. I got an author, C.T. Jackson. This will be fun. He's down in States. He wrote a book called So You Want to Be a Dictator. And yes, it's a parody book, but it's quite funny and it's out and just laughing and talking about all sorts of tips and suggestions for aspiring dictators. Perhaps Justin Trudeau might want to tune in that day and things such as that. And I'll have another guest on too. We haven't established exactly who that'll be yet. And of course, there'll be lots to cover at that time as well. Lots of news, lots of ranting. So thank you all for tuning in all of this week. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Well, I'll see you all on Monday at 11:30 a.m. sharp.